Hello, everybody. I was thinking over the past 24 hours about age. It's inevitable that we all grow old. And, you have friends who have parents and grandparents that are starting to age. And it's part of the natural process. And I can speak from experience because I'm getting some age on me. I'll be 82 this year. And I can associate with what some of my friends are going through because I went through the same thing with my mother and my father. My father passed away in 63. My mother has been gone 25 or so years. And I can remember those times. And it's just part of the natural process of growing old. And the older you get, the more of your friends are gone. And anyone that's my age can really associate that because of the number of people. Take when I was in my 20s in the military, I'm sure that I had a lot of friends, or especially supervisors, that if they were alive today, they would be close to 90, 100 years old. But getting away from that, I was thinking about some unusual things that I have experienced that are so insignificant that you would forget them. But this morning I was thinking of one in particular. When you go to the grocery store and you buy soft drinks, they'll be packaged in beautiful cans. If they're in a bottle, they'll have beautiful logos painted on the bottle. The mining camp where I lived when I was a young boy, I'm going to say around 6 years old, they had a commissary just across the road, and the road was a dirt road. And each morning, they would have an ice delivery to the store. And they'd take that ice and put it in a container, and then they would put soft drinks in the container. And it would stay that way all day, and it was outside. And they knew that if you picked up a soft drink, you'd walk in and pay for it, because that was during the day when you couldn't imagine anyone taking a soft drink without paying for it, especially in the mining camp. But the thing that was unusual about that, if you went by there late in the evening to get a soft drink, the ice had melted, and the water was kind of warm, so you couldn't have a good cold soft drink. But that's still not the unusual thing. And when you went there in the evening, the top of the water was completely covered with labels, because in those days they pasted a label to the bottle, and when the bottle set in that water, they would come off and come to the top and start floating. So when I think back of getting a soft drink back in the mining camp, I can see that container sitting there on the outside of the building by the door, and labels. You, you could take your hand and just scoop those labels up. There were so many. People were talking on Facebook about money and how filthy money is. Well, now I very seldom have any money. I have credit cards, and that's all I have. I seldom ever carry any money. And if I do, it's just like $2 or $3 till there's one little thing that I give $1 to, and you can't use a credit card on that. So I carry a few dollars until I can contribute $1 here and there. But they were talking on Facebook about money being so filthy. And I can remember back in the early 60s, when I was overseas in the military, I believe I saw some of the prettiest new money that became the ugliest old money that I have ever seen. It appeared that when a currency was issued, rather than to turn it in when it started to get a little frayed, they would just keep circulating it around. And some of the money that I saw was almost unrecognizable as money because it was totally worn out. I don't want to make this video too long. I'm trying to see on my camera up there exactly how long it's been running. In the mining camp where we lived, now, you know, when you're 6 years old, even at a young age, some people start to question. And there was an occurrence that set me on the avenue of wanting to know the facts. Each mining camp had what they called a camp doctor. I found out years later, my dad would tell me about it, some of these doctors were not really doctors. They were posing as doctors. But this one particular mining camp that I lived in, he lived about 3 houses down from where we lived. And he was the camp doctor. And he had a tree in his front yard. I think it had what they call crab apples on it. And I happened to ask a question about that tree. Someone said, "Oh, that's where they make all the medicine. All the medicine's ever been made comes off of that tree." And so we walked, on down the road. I got to thinking, now how could that be correct? And that's one of those things when you think back, at 6 years old, I was questioning everything. I would never take anything at face value. I wanted the facts. But in those days, even after I grew up and was in my teens, I guess this video is going to be too long, but if you like to listen to these old rambling videos, it doesn't make any difference. But when I was in my teens, if you wanted to research a subject, we didn't have an encyclopedia in our house, but the school had them and the library had them. But you would have to trek to the library when the school was closed, or you could find a magazine. My dad used to get 2 magazines called Popular Science and Popular Mechanics. And I would read those magazines from cover to cover. But in doing that, you would run across a subject or an article about some invention, and they would only hit the highlights. And if you wanted to pursue it more than what you could find in Popular Science or Popular Mechanics, you would search around for an address, and you would have to order either a book or a periodical. It was hard to get any information above the encyclopedia. And in the library, most of the books were fiction. I never could hardly read fiction. And the first thing that I would do when I went into a library is go into the nonfiction area, if they had a nonfiction area. But it was kind of frustrating trying to get information back in those days. And now, with Google, you can be sitting around with a group of people and something can be mentioned, and more than likely someone will have their iPhone. I can't hardly use an iPhone. This right here is a GPS unit, and it's a little larger than my iPhone, but I can't use one. I just can't. You know, my granddaughters can send a text and they can take their thumbs and just go a mile a minute. But I can't use one because my hands are too shaky, and if I hit an A, if it doesn't have sticky key lock on, I'll hit an A and it'll go A. So I don't use those. If I can't get my information from a laptop or a desktop, like you can see, I've got two large monitors, and I also have a monitor right here. This is a laptop, and I have a GPS or a desktop unit sitting down under the desk, and my laptop is driving this monitor, and my desktop is driving this monitor, and I also have a unit to where I can run both monitors at the same time. But the reason I'm going through that is that's the way you can get information now. And you can be in that conversation, and someone, especially if you... I can remember we used to visit my sister, and her granddaughter's husband was the best I have ever seen using one of those. And when you would be in a conversation, he'd be sitting there, and if you mentioned something he didn't know or he thought you wanted to ask a question about, you know, and a lot of times when the conversation got to the point to where no one knew what we were talking about, we would always look at him, and he would go to Google and he would get the information. But anyway, and now I've got several cameras. I'm using a GZM 200. This one right here is a 500. And the technology of these high-definition cameras that right there is a GoPro, and it'll do 4K. I've got a video out there on this. In fact, if you come into this YouTube channel, it will automatically start playing. That 4K video that I have, I did it with this. And this camera is nowhere near the quality in video quality as this camera. This is the camera I always use on road videos. The camera that I'm using for this, let me see how long this thing is. It's It's already 16 minutes, but I'm just jabbering, so I'm just going to let it go. You're not obligated to watch this whole thing. But anyway, this camera right here is JVC 500. It does a pretty good job indoors without any artificial light. But this JVC 200 that I'm using is pretty good for what I'm using it for. But what you can't see is I've got a huge soft light behind that camera pointed. Well, you can tell, I've mentioned that before. It kind of eliminates the shadows. I'm using a Blue Yeti microphone, and I've got a boom. It's hooked to a boom that my daughter got. There's a store that deals in returned merchandise, and she gets me all kinds of things at that store, and this is one of them. Not the Blue Yeti. I purchased the Blue Yeti, but this boom that it's on, she got that for just a few dollars. And I'd been thinking about ordering one, and it works great. But anyway, I've got a soft light that I do my videos from this location. I always use what did I do with it? My GoPro. See, that's what happens when you start getting some age on you. You start hiding things from yourself. I always use this on my road videos. But the microphone on these GoPros, this is an old one now. The new ones may be different. But the microphone is no good. It's just like this microphone on this camera is decent, but what I'm doing is I'm running the audio through my laptop. You can see it generate back there. So that's the way I do that. Well, it looks like I got off on a rant, but anyway, I wanted to just kind of be informal with this video. So thank you very much for watching. I appreciate it. And I've got a little remote here that I turn my camera off with. And that's what I'm going to do right now.